Okay, we're in the middle of a discussion from yesterday. We said the Torah gives a number of examples of lost objects, right? There's kol avedas achicha, every type of lost object. That includes, as you might expect, everything. And then you have, Torah gives a number of specific examples. Where is it here? You have specifically mentioned is chamor and simla, a donkey and a cloak, and also mentioned in the previous verse is shor oiseh. Shor oiseh nidachim. You find a lost ox or a lost sheep. So you have an ox, a sheep, a donkey, a cloak. The Mishnah says, why does the Torah specify a cloak? So the Mishnah says two features. Number one is that a cloak is not hefker. It is not ownerless. Somebody at some point in time owned it. Somebody created it, as opposed to finding an item which could very well be ownerless, which you do not have to return it. Right? So if you walk into walking in the wild and you find wild strawberries, you don't have to return them. Right? Even if you're not sure if they're wild strawberries, you also don't have to return them. Same tree, blueberries, gooseberries, whatever they had there. Okay. And the second point is that simanim work. We'll come back to the simanim soon. That's really the big heavy one that we'll have to deal with, later today. In the meantime, what does it mean? It was part of a group. We're at the Gemara 27a. It was part of every type of lost object. Why does the Torah specify an ox, a donkey, a sheep, or a cloak, similar as a garment? So where is it tzrichi? Each one's necessary. Each one tells you something about the laws of returning lost objects. Okay. So in other words, if it would have just said similar, I would think that the simanim, the signs, would have to be in the item itself. Okay, so let's explain. When you have a cloak and the guy identifies you that this garment has certain tears, right, or there's a certain stain somewhere, that's a siman. It's a sign in the garment itself. However, let's say a guy says, I lost my donkey and I was wearing a purple saddle. Right? Can we presume that's pretty unique? At least I've never seen it. Right? So the guy tells you he lost a purple saddle. Well, the saddle is not the donkey itself. If he says the donkey is branded with, I don't know, his birthday or something, then okay, well that's certainly unique. Right? A donkey branded, and that's the siman in the guf. There's a siman in the donkey itself. But the okif, the saddle, that has nothing to do with the donkey, right? That's something you put on the donkey. So the okif, even if it's purple, which is quite unique, maybe that type of siman wouldn't work. Maybe we would not return it. So therefore the Torah specifies a donkey. You don't actually have to give a siman of the item itself. You can give a siman of something that's attached to the item. So in other words, when you want to identify your cloak, it doesn't necessarily have to be identified by a certain stain or a certain tear or rip. It could also be identified by the fact that it had hanging from it a ski pass or something, or chain, whatever. There's something that was temporarily attached to it. Okay, so that takes care of simla, takes care of chamor, or donkey. We still have two left, right? We have shor and seh. Shor says okay. So the shor, the ox, teaches you the law of that. Not only do you have to return the ox, but you have to return any component of the ox that was lost. So, for example, let's say a guy shaves the ox's tail, takes off the hair of the ox's tail. Now, I understand that horse tails are used to make brooms, at least in the olden days. Oh. I'm not exactly sure what they use hair from an ox tail. Maybe they also use to make brooms. I'm not 100% sure. Okay. But apparently it was something valuable that also has to be returned. The selig yizaysev and a set for the wool that's shorn off of it. So Gemara says, well, it kind of sounds similar, no? No, what do you think? Shearing an ox or shearing a a sheep, a lamb, sounds like it's a similar idea.
Yeah.
You're shearing off something. So why do you need two verses? Apparently, the shearing of the oxtail is not such a common thing. If that's included, and if you have to return that, for sure you have to return things that are normally shorn, like a sheep. Rava says, "Chamor the board of Yehudah said Aveda kasha." There are two extra verses. There's the chamor of the bor. We'll explain that in a moment, and there's sev Aveda. Sev Aveda we just saw. The Torah says there are four specific sev Aveda. One of them is a sheep. We don't know why the Torah needed to write the word seh. That remains a question. And also chamor of bor. So if you remember, the Torah says what falls into a bor? A shor or a chamor. Right? And if the traditional opinion teaches us, shor says that you're only liable on damages for an ox that falls into a bor, but not for a human being. And chamor of a kalim. You're only liable for damages of animals and not for vessels. Like we explained, a bor is very unique in its type of damage, right? A bor doesn't do damage. In a certain sense, it's the doer of the damage is the entity that fell in. And clearly, right, in some houses the dishes go to the dishwasher by themselves. But most dishes tend not to walk. So there's no way for them to walk into the bar. Obviously, when you brought them into the bar, and the Torah says you're only chayav on the chamor, you're only chayav on the donkey or the ox, and you're not chayav on the kalim, on the vessels. Except that Rabbi Yehudah says that you are liable on vessels. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. He disagrees with the rabbi's opinion. According to Rabbi Yehudah, why does the Torah specify bar? Specify chamor, a donkey. According to the rabbis, the donkey tells me to exclude vessels. According to the rabbis, that you're liable on vessels. According to Rabbi Yehudah, that you're liable on vessels, well, why does it need to say chamor? And that remains a difficult question. Okay. Gemara says, maybe not only do you have to return the animal, you also have to return, pardon the language here, the fertilizer of the animal that was produced by the animal. So Gemara says, manure, that's something that people don't actually care about. If you find manure of an animal, you can keep it for yourself and put it in your own fields. So Gemara says, maybe it's coming to teach us simanim, the ibaylu, because we'll discuss this in a moment. We're going to ask a major question. Simanim d'oraisa d'rabbanan. Are the identification of a lost object with simanim, is that biblical or is that rabbinical? Like we said, we'll get to it in a moment. So therefore, Kosar Kamana said, I feel simanim hadrina lay, simanim d'oraisa. So the Gemara says, well, maybe that's what says coming to teach me. Set tells me that you can return an item by identifying its unique features from a biblical perspective. So Gemara says, because the author of the Mishnah puts simanim by simla, a garment, right? Diktani, because the Mishnah says, "Ma simla michedesh yesh b'simanim v'yesh lo toivin chayav l'hakros." Av kol davar sheyesh b'simanim v'yesh lo toivin chayav l'hakros. Shema minod desed la v'simanim hudasa. Okay, the fact that the Mishnah discusses simanim in the context of simla, of a garment, not in the context of seh, of a sheep, the fact that Torah had to give a specific example of a lost object, that is a sheep, among three other examples, right? A donkey, a garment, and an ox. That tells me that seh does not teach me simanim. I'm not sure why. I don't know why. But the Mishnah clearly indicates that if simanim is deraisa, it's biblical, it's going to be learned from simla, from a garment, and not from seh. A sheep. And simla is a garment. Okay. Toner Rabbanan. Asher Toivad. Okay, we're on 27a, about to start a new Gemara, Eric. A little more than halfway down the page, just after the two dots. Something that's lost, this excludes an item that's insignificant value. There isn't even a shava pruta. Rabbi Yehudah says in Matzasa, and you find it. This excludes a lost object that does not have a shava pruta. So let's just try to point here the direction we're going. There's two major questions. There's two potential sources for why you do not need to return something worth less than a quarter, for argument's sake. Maybe a shavuot pruta might be a penny. There's different ways to calculate it. Typically, a shavuot pruta is an insignificant amount of item. Something today you might think of like a nickel or a dime.
Maybe even just a penny.
However, there's another way to calculate it, which is to calculate it by the value of a half a grain of barley in silver, which is less than a penny. So I think if you take some silver, put it on a scale, and try to calculate what the market value of a half a grain of barley in silver is, it's not very significant. I think it's less than a penny as well. Okay, that's as a side point. But regardless, let's say if it's less than a dime, it's not significant. So how do we know this? There's two verses. One verse says you have to lose an item of significance. Another verse says you have to find an item of significance. And we'll soon see, is there a difference between these two? Is there a difference between the emphasis being on the losing or on the finding? As you have two verses. One verse emphasizes finding, the other verse emphasizes losing. Is there a difference? My benayos. The Gemara proposes a few differences and finally settles on one difference. So let's get to it. Abaya says, nah, just there's no real difference. The only difference is what they think the implication of the words mean. It's sort of the debating about the implication of language, but there's no real difference. One says for losing, you have to find it. According to the opinion that says you learn from Asher Toivet it was lost, what does he do with the verse Umatzasa and you find it? So Gemara says that okay. Meaning that when the Torah says the word Umatzasa, it says that the limitation of returning lost objects is to Jews only, even if it was already taken in your property. Meaning, I might have thought that a Jew's object you're obligated to pick up and return. A non-Jew, you're not obligated to pick it up. But if you did pick it up, then you would have to return it. So therefore, Matzah teaches no. Finders, finders, keepers, losers, weepers. That's the general rule, unless the loser is a Jew. And then you have to return it. And now you have to return it, you also have to pick it up and return it.
Or the loser is a Gentile who is a sore loser. Then you got to.
Well, according to the opinion that emphasizes finding it, what do you do with the verse that says that you have to lose it? Rabbi Yochanan says the name of Shimon Yechai. How do I know that if a river carries away a lost object that it is permitted? It only becomes an aveda if it's findable. If it's inherently unfindable, it's carried away by a river, then anyone can keep it, and the owner automatically gives up hope of getting back. Okay. So now we go. Okay. So according to the opinion that says Asher Toivad, Umatzasa teaches me Rav Noi. According to the opinion that says Umatzasa, Asher Toivad teaches me Zita Shalyam. In other words, according to each opinion, how do they know the other one's point? Let's explain. In other words, we say that Rav Noi was the one who expands the ability to keep an object found that belongs to a non-Jew. Right? According to Rav Noi, Rav Noi's source is the word "and you found it." According to the opinion that says "and you found it" teaches me less than a shavuot pruta. So how do they know the law of Rav Noi? How do they know the law? As if Rav Noi says the fact that Torah says umatzasa means you only return objects of Jews. But if you hold that umatzasa teaches me something else, it teaches me you have to find something of value. So how do we know that's the law of Rav Noi, that if you find a non-Jew's item, you're allowed to keep it? How do we know that law is in effect? What's the source of it? We got it? Now, basically what we're doing here is there's two ideas. It's toivad umatzasa, right? So if umatzasa teaches me both a non-Jew's item you can keep. Asher Toivin Menu teaches me if it went down a river, you can keep it too. Now, both laws everyone agrees about. The problem is that we have a debate here. One of those two sources teaches me less than a shava pruta. Meaning you have to find or return something that's worth less than a shava pruta. Something that's worth more than a shava pruta. If it's insignificant, you don't have to return it. So if that's the case, whichever one it is, well, how do they know the other concept? Because everybody agrees to three rules. One is if it's less than a shava pruta, you don't have to return it. Number two is if it goes down a river, you don't have to return it. And number three is if it's a non-Jew, you don't have to return it. How do you fit three things into two holes? Got it? That's sort of, we're looking for the third key here. Okay. One second. The Gemara says the vim matzasa is plural. So you have three entries there. You have toivad, matzasa, and vim matzasa. Umatzasa, really. You have a vav there. So the vav teaches me two things, which is common. The fact that Torah added a vav. Vav is a connecting phrase that can teach me another law. Okay. Okay. What in the other side? How do they know that you can keep? If it went down a river, you can keep it. Nafkalei mimenu. Okay, so we have three things. We have toivad, matzasa, and mimenu. Those are the three things. The other opinions. One opinion doesn't like the extra vav. The other opinion doesn't like the word mimenu. Okay. That's all in Abaya. Now we get to Rava. Rava Amar. Rava is trying to find another difference between the two opinions. Again, one opinion learns from toivad, losing. The other opinion learns from umatzasa, from finding. Okay, so Rava comes with an interesting idea. He says very simple. When the guy lost it, it was worth a nickel. It was worth a dime, let's say. And now when the guy found it, it's worth a nickel. So it went down in value. So if you focus on toivad, on the losing, the guy lost a shava pruta. He lost an item of value. But if you focus on the finding, he didn't find an item of value. Good idea? And the same thing, okay. So finding leka, well, you didn't find an item of value. And we mean of value here, we mean the threshold of value, which we're arbitrarily explaining it as a dime, 10 cents.
Maybe you think that smashed it wasn't very good anymore.
Yeah. That's another way as well. What about the fact that Asher Toivad is linked to Umatzasa? The verses are written one after another. So if you say Asher Toivad losing, well, you also have to find it. So why wouldn't Asher Toivad also define Umatzasa, meaning that the minimum quantity of losing is also defines the minimum quantity of finding? So you don't really gain anything. So the Gemara tries the opposite first. Okay, well, he lost it; it was worthless, and then it went up in value. It was one of these meme coins, these crypto meme coins. It went, it was worth like a fraction of a penny, and then somebody tweeted about it, and it was worth $1 million. Okay, one opinion says in Matzasa you find it, so you found something that was more than a minimum value. When you focus on the losing, well, you don't lose an item of minimum value. According to the opinion that says you have to find it. Why doesn't the finding also define the losing? Just like we previously said, the losing should define the finding. Now we're saying the emphasis on the finding should also define the definition of losing. So it should both be exactly the same. Okay. Okay, so that was the guy lost the meme coin, and it was worth a nickel. Then there was a crypto crash, and it was worthless. It was worth a fraction of a penny. And then there was a crypto rally, and it went up in value again. Okay, so now as follows. If you focus on the losing, 1 second. Okay, if you focus on the losing, he lost something that was worth a pruta. Was worth a significant value, and he found something worth significant value. Significant meaning a dime, let's say. But however, according to the opinion that focuses on the finding, how do you define that? You have to have the minimum value from the beginning until the end. It's got to always have been worth a minimum amount of money. If in the middle it wasn't worth a minimum amount of money, you don't have to return it.
Like the important thing would be the finding, if you find something.
Yeah.
Depends which side of the coin you're.
Huh?
Depends which side of the coin you're.
That's also true. Okay. Bottom of 27a, simanim deraisa or derabbanan. Is the identification of unique features, simanim, is that biblical or is that rabbinical? Ma'anaf what's like, who cares? La'adure get isha b'simanim. Can you return a divorce with simanim? Right? If simanim is biblical, so if the woman gives a unique feature to her divorce, you'd be able to return it to her. If not, then she would have to bring witnesses. The fact that she has simanim alone would not be sufficient because that's only rabbinical. Why did the rabbis create this law? We'll discuss it soon, but it's very simple. Basically, everybody would rather a law that allows basically everyone to return lost objects with minimal possibility of trickery. You follow? In other words, because if everybody has to bring witnesses to every diamond ring nobody has witnesses in all these things. Nobody's gone through your house. You don't have witnesses on every single item that you carry around on a regular basis. You probably have witnesses to almost none of them. So therefore, it's better for the system to function. It's better that everybody agree to return lost objects, and we'll discuss this more hopefully later today. Okay, or it's biblical. That's sort of the law. That's what the Torah says. Fine. And if you say it's biblical, you return a divorce. The rabbis only made a law by financial matters, by matters of divorce of religious significance, not financial, like for example, marriage, which is primarily a religious affair. They would not have made this decree. Toshma. So let's examine this. The Mishnah says, so look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, simla is an extra word in the verse. What does it teach me? Number one, simla is something that inherently was owned at some point in time. And number two, it's got simanim, it's custom made. Right? All clothing was custom made until the modern day and age. Okay, what does that tell you then? It tells me the Mishnah effectively is saying that simanim is daraisa. The Mishnah is telling you that you learn the concept of simanim from the verse. It must be daraisa, must be biblical. Gemara says not necessarily. Tana tayvin etzrichalei simanim kedinasva. The main focus of the Mishnah was the fact that a cloak or garment is inherently and probably is inherently owned, or certainly was inherently owned. You can't grow a cloak on a tree. And that's the main point. The fact that simanim were mentioned is mentioned as a side point. It's not really a derivation from the verse. It would be it's also true, which is why it's mentioned. But ultimately speaking, it's not a biblical derivation. It's a rabbinical support. This concept is called an asmachta. Sometimes the rabbis will make a decree and they'll find the verses could indicate like what we're saying. And this would be such an example. The verse really means that the fact that the garment is not ownerless. It's gotta have an owner. Somebody sewed it together. However, the fact that simanim, the fact that it's custom made and it has unique features, is only mentioned as a side point to support the rabbinical decree, but it wasn't mentioned as sort of a support that it must be biblical. Toshma. The Brayso mentions chamor b'simanim ukaf. You can identify a donkey with the simanim of the saddle. Well, 1 second. Simanim again? Simanim of a saddle? And again, chamor here means the chamor of the verse, right? When the verse mentions chamor, a donkey, it means identifying a donkey by identifying the saddle. So you gave an example of a purple saddle, right? Have you seen a purple saddle?
You've seen a purple saddle?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. Okay. Yeah. Oh, very good. Very good. Very good. Okay. So Gemara says, no. We're talking about, you're right, you're identifying it with the features of the saddle. However, you're not identifying it based on your own claim. It's Eidei Ukaf. You have witnesses to testify that this purple saddle was yours. And that runs into a small complication, which we'll get to in a moment. Toshma. You keep the item with you until your friend seeks out the item. Is there a possibility that you'd give it to him before your friend asks? Right? Why does the Torah say your friend's going to ask and you return the item? Obviously, he's going to ask. Like, why would you give it to him otherwise? Obviously, he has to ask for it. So what does it mean? When he asks, make sure he's not a trickster. Is make sure you're giving it back to the legitimate owner. Imrami or ain't Imrami. My love, how are you going to check? B'simonim, with unique features, right? So the Gemara says, "Lo be'edim." You're not going to rely on him for the unique features. You'll need to rely on witnesses for those unique features. Because of course you use the features, but you don't rely on the individual. You have to rely on witnesses. Toshma, we're together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're looking to we learned this Gemara in Yevamos toward the end of the Masechta, and we're looking to identify a deceased body, right? A woman lost her husband. His body was maimed or mutilated. We have to try to identify the body. So here's the rule: his face must be intact with the nose that's still attached. Even if there are simonim in his body, or his kelev or his vessels. We see from here simonim deraisa that simonim are biblical because you're identifying a man based on simonim. I'm sorry. Simonim lav deraisa. In other words, you don't rely on the simonim of his body to identify him. So let's say the guy has a known birthmark or a tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Obviously, tattoo is prohibited under Jewish law, but let's say he had one anyway. Okay, you can't identify him by his tattoo, right? You have to identify him by his face.
Well, Rabbi, what if there's no face? What do you do then?
Then you're in a problem. She could be an aguna.
Hmm.
That's exactly what the Mishnah is trying to tell you. So this indicates to us that simonim, personal identifying features are not sufficient. The fact that you found a wallet with him and has his ID card is not sufficient.
Mm.
Okay. So we see here that simonim is not deraisa, it's not biblical. So the Gemara says, Amri, no. We're not talking here about real simonim. We're not talking about like a tattoo or a birthmark. What are we talking about? Simonim meaning like gufay, the orach, the guts. His body, was he short or was he tall? In other words, you can't identify her husband by saying, oh, he was a short man and this guy's short, it must be her husband. These are not real simonim. Kelev, his vessels, why don't you use those to identify him? The chayshinu l'shayla. He was carrying a briefcase or a hiking backpack. Well, yeah, maybe he borrowed the hiking backpack. There's the fact that it was his hiking backpack doesn't mean anything because maybe he loaned it to somebody else. The Gemara says, if you're concerned that maybe he lent out his stuff, then how can you return a donkey based on the saddle? Maybe somebody else borrowed the purple saddle. So who said the donkey is it's his donkey? Maybe it's his saddle with somebody else's donkey. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry, they skipped the word. Apparently, it sort of scratches or it's not comfortable for the donkey with the borrowed saddle. So it's sort of the saddle becomes fit. It sort of gets like fitted to the new donkey, and it ruins the saddle for the previous donkey. So people don't lend out saddles. So it is a good simon because the saddle is not loaned out. Another possibility is Kalev, his vessels. What does it mean? How do you identify his vessels? They say, oh, yeah, his briefcase was also black, or his briefcase was white. You don't know for sure that this is his briefcase. You just know that the color is similar, which is not a real simon again. Okay, so okay, so guy loses a divorce and then he finds it. The general rule is you don't know if he has to presume it might be somebody else's divorce, unless he found it, inside his computer, inside his briefcase. Okay, so what happened? It was kosher b'kiss. It was tied to his wallet, or it was in his personal briefcase with tabas, or it was with his ring, or he found it amongst his other stuff. He found it in his car, right? Then you can give back. You can presume the divorce was exactly the way you lost it. What you found it. So you don't. In other words, you don't suspect that anything went wrong with this divorce.
So are you saying, Rabbi, you can go as simonim if there's not a face, as long as all the simonim Or present?
No, so the Gemara initially, should be clear about this. The Gemara initially says that we're talking about where there's real simanim. Real simanim meaning like birthmarks and tattoos.
I see.
And clearly we don't go by these identifying features. So simanim must be lav d'oraisa, not biblical. And the Gemara resolves that no, the simanim here doesn't mean real simanim. It means fake simanim, meaning things like he's short or tall. I don't know exactly what his briefcase looked like, but I know he had a black briefcase. And this guy, also, this deceased man, also has a black briefcase. Exactly. So it could be that we're not resolving the question.
Yeah.
It could be that simanim are deraisa. The reason why simanim don't work in this price is because they're not real simanim. They're not tattoos and birthmarks. They're these fake simanim, like short, tall, very generic things. Yeah. Okay, so now we're in the next Gemara. So the guy loses the divorce. You have to presume that something fishy went on with it. Unless you find it in your car. You find it in your briefcase, you find it attached to your wallet. Then you can return it. Well, 1 second. Maybe you loaned out your car, right? Maybe you loaned out your wallet, and you loaned out your briefcase. That's my caution. Let's be concerned that maybe the guy loaned out his stuff, and then the divorce was played around with by the guy who borrowed his stuff. The Gemara says, no, none of these things are not the type of things you lend out. People don't lend these things out. A briefcase or a wallet. 1 second. Okay, because there is sort of a bad omen to lending out these things. People feel like if you borrow their wallet, it means sort of like the spiritual taking of their wealth. The Gemara does not indicate that this is real in any way, by the way. It seems just to be something that people typically don't do. Not that there's any real omen for this type of behavior.
So if you have a divorce paper, but it's got names and addresses in there.
So it doesn't have addresses. It has names, but that's sort of the concern. The concern is once it's dropped, everything is fishy. And there could be people with similar names. Okay. V'tabas and a ring, because a ring can be used to forge documents. You sign it with your ring. Say these are signet rings.
Right.
So that used to seal the wax. So these are not the type of things you loan out because people can forge your signature effectively. Okay, let's say this is machlokes tanom. Ein meidin al shuma. How does the article translate the word shuma? It's like a wart or something.
Witnesses may not testify. Identity of a corpse in order to remarry this. Recognition of a wart.
Wart, it's a wart. Yeah, I thought so. Okay. So talking about a shuma, wart. Okay, so he's trying to identify a deceased man, and he has he's known to have a certain type of wart in a certain place in his body. It's not an identifying feature. Rabbi Dovid Yehudah says, yeah, you could identify somebody based on a wart. So Gemara says, my love must be the debate is with our debate. Kamma, the first opinion says you don't use a word as identification. Savar simanim d'Rabbanan. Healed simanim is rabbinical. But Elazar ben Mavoi savar simanim d'Oraisa. Elazar ben Mavoi says no, simanim is biblical. So that must be the debate. So the Gemara offers a few alternatives. Everybody could hold that personal identifying features are biblical. But the kids are, we're talking about a type of wart that people of that age often get. So some people, the rabbis say it's not a good siman. Why? Because we're talking about a type of wart that could occur naturally among people who were born at his time, his age, or his month. The other opinion disagrees, and he says, no, you don't presume that the wart was associated with his specific age. Another possibility is it could be that there's no such this whole proposition that people get warts at the same time in their lives is wrong. The question is, does a wart change after a person dies? If it does, then you can no longer rely on it as a siman because he's dead. One opinion says that the warts change after he dies, you can't rely on him. They don't change, and therefore you couldn't rely on it. Another possibility is the the warts don't change after you die, and simanim is rabbinical. So remember, we spoke about a siman muvik. A siman muvik is such a unique feature that even biblically speaking, it's a good proof. So even if simanim is rabbanon, it could be that a wart in a very specific location of the guy's body is so unique, it's like a siman muvik. It's so unique that it satisfies even the biblical obligation. That's the debate. The debate is a wart such a unique siman that you can rely on it? Okay. Let's just the next just 30 seconds there. So set up for tomorrow. Always good to drop you off with a question. So Amar Rava. So Rava has a question. If you'll tell me simanim are not biblical, how exactly do you ever return a lost object? Your question.
It's the boss asking.
What? Okay. So tomorrow we'll kick off. I already alluded out to the answer in the beginning of today. The answer basically is